the orchard, the dungeon, and the girl who never heard him calling. Chapter 7, What Stone Remembers. For the rest of that night, no one slept. Maribel remained near the wall until her knees weakened. Even then, she did not move far. She sat on the floor beneath the vent, her back against the plaster, one palm pressed to the place where the faint answering taps had come. Below her, Elias sat against the same wall in the dark, his shoulder touching stone cold enough to ache. They were separated by a few feet, a sealed shaft, old resin, ironwork, and Lord Edric Aster's will. It was closer than they had been in days. It was farther than anything Elias had known. Neither could truly speak to the other. Not in any way that carried meaning. Words rose, broke, and died between them. But sound had found a narrow road. Taps. Scrapes. Small knocks against the wall. 1 tap meant yes. 2 meant no. 3 meant I am here. That was Serapha's idea. She whispered it with the resigned terror of a woman stepping past the edge of her own obedience. Nothing complicated, she said. Nothing that requires guessing. Guessing is where hope becomes dangerous. Maribel looked at her. Hope is already dangerous. Yes, Serapha said. That is why we must make it useful. She stood near the hearth, arms folded tightly, listening for footsteps in the corridor. Her face had lost its usual severity. Without it, she seemed older, less polished, and more breakable. For years, she had survived by becoming unpleasant in acceptable ways. Now fear had stripped even that from her. Maribel knelt beside the wall. Elias, she whispered, though she knew he could not hear the word clearly. 1 for yes. 2 for no. 3 for here. Below, Elias strained toward the murmur, catching pieces through stone, tone more than sentence. But then she tapped once. A pause. Twice. A pause. 3 times. He understood. He pressed his forehead to the wall and tapped 3 times back. Maribel's breath caught. Serapha turned away sharply, one hand at her mouth. For several minutes, that was all they did. 3 taps from above. 3 taps from below. I am here. I am here. I am here. The exchange should have been too small for what it carried. It was nothing but knuckles against old construction. Yet each answer seemed to return Elias to himself by fractions. He had not vanished. He had not been replaced by rumor. He was not a coward in her mind now, not entirely. Somewhere above him, Maribel knew. The truth had reached her. Late, bruised, and half-starved, but alive. After the first flood of recognition passed, Maribel began asking what could be asked. Are you hurt? Serapha stopped her. No. Too vague. You cannot hear the answer beyond yes or no unless you build it carefully. Maribel swallowed, nodded, and tried again. Are you alone? 1 tap. Yes. Are you locked in? 1 tap. Is there a guard outside? Elias paused. He did not always know. Sometimes he heard movement beyond the door. Sometimes nothing. The guards came irregularly enough to keep him uncertain, perhaps by design. He tapped once, then twice, then stopped, frustrated by the language's narrowness. Maribel understood only that the answer was not simple. Her hands curled in her lap. Serapha crouched beside her. We know enough for tonight. No, we don't. We know he lives. Maribel shut her eyes. That truth was both miracle and injury. He lived. Under her. For days, he had been under her. while she cursed him, while she let her father's poison enter the cracks in her certainty, while Elias watched, heard, called, and remained unanswered. The thought opened beneath her like a cellar door. "I called him coward," she whispered. Serapha said nothing. "I said it out loud." Below, Elias saw the shape of her through the vent's angled blur. He could not hear every word, but he saw the way she bent inward, as if pain had become weather inside her. He tapped 3 times. Maribel's head lifted. 3 taps again. "I am here." She pressed her hand flat to the wall. "I know," she breathed. "I know." By dawn, they had formed the edge of a plan. Not a good plan. There was no good plan inside Aster Hall. Good plans required time, freedom, trustworthy doors. They had Serapha's fear, Maribel's rage, Elias's weakening body, and one uncertain message that had somehow reached the cell before: "Your mother knows you live. Tomas watches the east gate. Do not shout when the door opens tomorrow. There may be a way." Maribel knew nothing of the note until Elias communicated it clumsily through taps, scratches, and guesswork. It took nearly an hour and left all 3 of them exhausted. "Someone reached him," Maribel said. Serapha frowned. "Who?" "I don't know." "You said Annie was dismissed." "Yes." "Then not Annie." "Cora." Maribel thought of the maid's frightened hands, her mother in the laundry, the way she had promised to refuse all messages. "No," she said. "Not unless desperation has made me stupid." Serapha's mouth tightened. Desperation is not stupidity. It only borrows its clothes. The message had come from below the door. That meant someone with access to the lower corridor. A servant? A guard? Garin? Impossible. Perhaps not impossible. Maribel remembered how he had avoided her eyes at dinner. How his silence had arrived late when Elias Seldo's name came up. How men who obeyed too long sometimes developed private cracks in their obedience. "Captain Pike," she said. Serapha looked alarmed. "Do not trust him." "I don't." "Good. But he may hate this more than he admits." "Hatred without action is only discomfort." Maribel looked at the wall. "Then we give him action." The chance came sooner than expected. Lord Halbrecht's party arrived before noon. Maribel heard the carriage wheels first. 4 horses, maybe 6, iron rims over wet gravel in the front drive. Then voices in the courtyard, men calling to one another, servants rushing with luggage, the bright false music of arrival. The house shifted toward performance. Even the guards stood straighter when visitors entered. Public respectability had come through the door wearing travel cloaks. Serapha dressed Maribel in pearl muslin. Not blue. The gown was fine enough to satisfy Edric, pale enough to make Maribel look ghostly, and plain enough to feel like a refusal if one knew where to look. Serapha fastened the last hook with trembling fingers. "You must be careful today," she said. "I am finished being careful in ways that only help him." That is exactly the sort of sentence people say before making mistakes. Maribel met her eyes in the mirror. "Then help me make a better one." Serapha looked down. For a moment, Maribel thought fear had won again. Then the older woman leaned closer and spoke almost soundlessly. "The Lower East Stair is watched by Brant at night. He drinks after supper if he can. Olwen replaces him near midnight. Olwen is afraid of rats and avoids the old wine corridor unless ordered. Garin carries keys. Your father keeps the master ring in his study desk, lower left drawer." Maribel stared. Serapha continued fastening the gown as if discussing ribbon. The drawer sticks. Lift before pulling. Maribel's throat tightened. Serapha. Do not thank me, Serapha said. Gratitude makes cowardice harder to return to. Then she stepped back and raised her voice. There. Suitable. When Maribel descended, the entrance hall smelled of wet wool, orange peel, horse leather, and flowers arranged too heavily. Lord Halbrecht stood beside her father, broad and red-faced from travel. His son Alaric was at the foot of the stairs. Alaric Halbrecht was not cruel-looking. Maribel hated that. It would have been easier if he had been visibly vile, a sneering mouth, a greedy stare, hands already claiming what had not been offered. Instead, he was 20 or 21, fair-haired, neatly dressed, with a nervous sincerity that made the situation worse. He bowed when she reached the last step. Lady Maribel. Lord Alaric. Only Alaric, if it pleases you. It does not yet displease me. He blinked, then smiled cautiously. A promising beginning. That surprised her. Her father watched from near the fireplace. Maribel felt his attention like a blade laid flat against the skin. Lunch was served in the west parlour. Lord Halbrecht spoke loudly of roads, hunting, and wool prices. Edric answered with calm interest. Lady Serapha sat beside Maribel, rigid as a church candle. Alaric tried twice to begin a conversation and twice allowed her short answers to end it. The third time, he lowered his voice. You do not want me here. Maribel looked at him. He had spoken plainly. Not accusingly. Not wounded. Simply. No, she said. Alaric nodded once. I thought so. You came anyway. My father wanted me to. So did mine. A brief, humorless understanding passed between them. He looked toward the older men, who were speaking of tenant yields as if discussing weather. I was told you were shy, Alaric said. You were lied to. I begin to gather that. Maribel turned her cup slowly in its saucer. Alaric. Yes. Are you kind? The question startled him into honesty. I try to be. That is not the same. No, he said. But it is what I have. She studied him. A decent man in the wrong doorway was still a door locked against her, but decency might yet be used. She disliked the thought. It made her feel like her father's daughter. I need to speak to Captain Pike alone, she said. Alaric's face changed only slightly. Across the room, Edric laughed softly at something Lord Halbrecht said. Alaric followed her glance. That seems difficult. Yes. Why me? Because everyone expects me to avoid you. If I ask you to walk with me, they will be pleased. And Captain Pike? He follows me now. Alaric absorbed that. Then he asked, am I assisting a romance? Maribel's hand tightened around the teacup. For a second, she could not answer. Alaric saw something in her face and sobered. I'm sorry, he said. That was careless. She looked down. Yes. A pause. Then he said, very quietly, tell me what you need. After lunch, Maribel asked to show Alaric the East Gallery. Her father's eyes sharpened with satisfaction so brief that most people would have missed it. Maribel did not. It sickened her, but she let him have that small false victory. She even allowed Alaric to offer his arm. They walked beneath portraits of dead Asters, each face paler and more entitled than the last. Garin followed at a respectful distance. Serapha remained below with the older men, though Maribel felt the force of her fear from rooms away. Alaric spoke lightly of paintings. Maribel answered lightly enough. At the turn near the linen passage, Alaric stopped before a portrait of a woman with a long neck and an expression of magnificent boredom. "Is she an ancestor?" he asked loudly. Maribel paused beside him. "Unfortunately." Garin stopped several steps behind. Alaric leaned closer to the painting, blocking the sight line from the far corridor. His voice dropped. "Now." Maribel turned slightly, not enough to look suspicious. "Captain Pike," she said. Garin stepped forward. "My lady." She kept her eyes on the portrait. "I know he is beneath my room." Silence. Alaric did not move. Garin's face hardened in the polished reflection of the painting glass. "My lady, I do not know what you mean." "Yes, you do." "No. My father has mistaken your obedience for ownership." That reached him. She saw it in the small tightening near his scar. "Careful," he said. "That is what everyone tells me when they want me harmless." Garin looked down the corridor. Maribel continued, "You got a message to him?" "Nothing. His mother knows he lives because of you." "Still nothing." "Thank you," she said. The captain's eyes flicked to hers then, sharp and pained. "Do not thank me for half a sin." Then finish choosing. Alaric kept looking at the portrait as if fascinated by the dead woman's pearls. Garin's voice lowered. "You cannot free him through a hallway full of guards and guests." "Not through the hallway." "Then how?" "Through the truth." At that, Garin almost laughed. It was a quiet, bitter breath. "My lady, truth has no legs in houses like this." "Then give it witnesses." She saw him understand. "Not fully." "Enough." Before he could answer, Lord Edric's voice came from the far end of the gallery. "Maribel." She turned. Her father stood beneath the archway, smiling faintly. Lord Halbrecht was beside him. The older man seemed merry, unaware that the air in the gallery had become a drawn wire. "Your guest may wish to see the gardens," Edric said. Alaric straightened. "I would be glad to." "Later," Maribel said. Her father's smile did not change. "Now." It was a small command, dressed as suggestion. Maribel took Alaric's arm again and passed her father with her chin lifted. Garin remained behind, but as she moved away, she heard the captain's boot shift once against the floor. One tap. Not against stone. Against polished wood. Maribel nearly stopped. She did not. In the garden, Alaric walked beside her under trimmed hedges and pale afternoon sun. The air smelled of damp earth and rosemary. Beyond the walls lay Lowmere, low and grey and unaware that one of its sons was hidden beneath the house above it. "You are in serious trouble," Alaric said. Maribel almost smiled. "I had begun to suspect. Your father frightens me. He frightens everyone sensible." "And you?" "Yes," she said. "But not enough anymore." Alaric nodded slowly. "I can send a rider," he said. "To my uncle in Bellwether. He is a magistrate." Maribel shook her head. By the time anyone returned, Elias could be moved. "Then what?" She looked up at the east tower. Her room was there, its windows catching the pale light. Beneath it, hidden in stone, Elias waited. "My father believes shame is private," she said. "That is why he uses it so well. He counts on silence from everyone. Servants, guards, clerks, me." Alaric followed her gaze. "You want to expose him during dinner." "I want to force the door open while the house is full of people he cannot easily threaten all at once." That may not save Elias. No, she said. But waiting quietly will not save him either. Alaric was silent for a while. Then he said, I will help. Why? He looked at her, and there was sadness in his face, not for himself but for the absurd machinery they had both been placed inside. Because I would rather be rejected by you honestly than accepted by someone imprisoned into politeness. Maribel's eyes stung unexpectedly. You are inconveniently decent, she said. So I am told by creditors. She almost laughed. The sound did not survive, but the attempt mattered. That evening, Aster Hall dressed itself for dinner as if beauty could launder anything. Candles burned in every sconce. The long table glittered with silver, crystal, and porcelain thin enough to show light through the rims. Lord Halbrecht wore burgundy velvet. Alaric wore dark blue. Edric wore black. Maribel wore pearl muslin and no jewels except one small silver pin that had belonged to her mother. Serapha saw the pin and went pale. My lady, she whispered before they entered the dining room, do not do this unless you mean never to return from it. Maribel looked at her. I know. No, Serapha said. You don't. No one knows until after. Maribel touched her arm gently. Then I will know after. Dinner began. Soup. Fish. Pheasant. Wine. Words moved around the table with practiced emptiness. Lord Halbrecht praised the estate. Edric praised the Halbrecht mills. Alaric answered when required, but his eyes kept drifting toward Maribel. Serapha barely touched her food. Garin stood near the wall. Ven had been invited late, a courtesy to administration, and sat near the lower end of the table looking nervous. Brandt guarded the outer door. Olwen stood near the service passage. Everything was in place. Too many things, Maribel thought. Plans looked simpler before rooms filled with people. Beneath the floor and stone, Elias waited without knowing the hour. He had received no second message. He had heard more footsteps than usual, more distant movement through the house, the heavy music of company above. His ration had come early, delivered by Olwen, who avoided looking at him and dropped the bread as if the cell itself were diseased. Elias had saved half the bread. He did not know why. Habit, perhaps. Hope had made him practical again. Now he stood on the crate, watching Maribel's empty room through the vent. She had been dressed before sunset and taken away. He had seen the pearl gown only in passing, the pale sweep of skirt, the set of her shoulders. She knew. That should have been enough to steady him. Instead, knowing she knew made his helplessness sharper. Her pain was no longer misdirected. It had found him. It had nowhere to go. He tapped 3 times. No answer, of course. She was not there. Above, in the dining room, Maribel placed her spoon down before dessert. The sound was small. Her father heard it. She rose. Conversation thinned, then stopped. Lord Halbrecht looked up with pleasant confusion. Alaric set his glass down carefully. Serapha closed her eyes. Garin did not move. Edric watched his daughter from the head of the table. Maribel, he said. She looked at Lord Halbrecht first. My lord, forgive the discourtesy. I cannot continue this dinner while a man is imprisoned beneath this house. The silence after that was enormous. It seemed to enter every candle flame. Lord Halbrecht blinked. I beg your pardon. Edric stood slowly. My daughter is unwell. No, Maribel said. I am clearer than I have been in days. Ven's face had gone grey. Brandt stepped away from the door. Garen's hand moved near his keys, then stilled. Edric spoke with careful softness. You will leave this room now. Maribel's heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her throat. But Alaric stood. I would like to hear her, he said. His father turned. Alaric. No, Alaric said, though politely. If there is an accusation, let it be answered. Edric looked at him. For the first time that evening, uncertainty touched the room. Maribel seized it. His name is Elias Seldo. My father had him taken from the mud fields and locked somewhere beneath the east tower. A ventilation shaft connects his cell to my room. I heard him. I spoke with him. Lady Serapha knows enough to fear it. Captain Pike knows more. Every eye moved to Garen. The captain remained still. Edric's voice cut in. This is hysteria. Maribel laughed once. There. That word. I wondered when it would come. Lord Halbrecht pushed his chair back. Edric, what is this? A young woman's humiliation dressed as drama. My lord, Alaric said, then open the East Tower cellars. Edric turned on him. You are a guest in my house. And therefore difficult to arrest quietly. The sentence landed harder because Alaric said it mildly. Brant moved toward Maribel. Garen stepped into his path. The two men looked at one another. Edric said, Captain. Garen did not move. Maribel stared at him, barely daring to breathe. Then Captain Garen Pike removed the keyring from his belt and set it on the table. The metal struck the wood with a sound Elias could not hear below, though it would decide the rest of his life. I know the door, Garen said. The room broke open. Not loudly at first. Lord Halbrecht swore under his breath. Ven stood too quickly and knocked over his wine. Serapha began to weep without covering her face this time. Edric remained motionless, his gaze fixed on Garen with an expression beyond anger. You forget yourself, Edric said. Garen's face was pale but steady. No, my lord. I remember too much. Maribel moved first. She snatched the keys from the table and ran. Alaric followed. Garen followed after him. Behind them came shouting, Edric's command, Lord Halbrecht's alarm, chairs scraping, Brant cursing as Olwen hesitated in the doorway and blocked him by accident or by fear. Maribel did not look back. She ran through the corridor, pearl muslin gathered in both hands, slippers slipping on polished floors. She had never run inside Aster Hall. Not like this. As a child she had skipped, chased sun patches, fled lessons with laughing guilt. This was different. This was war inside a house that had mistaken her for decoration. Left, Garen called behind her. Servants stare. She turned so sharply her shoulder struck the wall. Pain flared. She kept running. The lower air hit colder with each stare. The smell changed from beeswax and flowers to damp stone, old wood, and iron. The sounds of the dining room faded above, replaced by the pounding of feet behind her and her own breath breaking in her chest. At the bottom, she nearly dropped the keys. Garen took them from her hand. This one, he said. They reached the old wine corridor. A guard stood there. Olwen. He saw Maribel, saw Garen, saw Alaric, saw the keys, and went white. Move, Garen said. Olwen did. They ran past him. At the end of the corridor stood a narrow iron door. Maribel stopped before it. For 1 second, she could not move. This was the door. Not metaphor. Not suspicion. Not nightmare. Door. Behind it was Elias. Or what remained of him after days of being unseen. "Open it," she said. Garin fitted the key. His hand shook once. The lock resisted. "Open it," Maribel said again, voice breaking. The key turned. Inside the cell, Elias heard it. At first, he thought the sound belonged to another dream. He had dreamed doors before. Dreams had become cruelly practical in the cell: footsteps, keys, Maribel calling from just beyond reach. He stood beneath the shaft, one hand against the wall, not daring to turn. Then the lock turned fully. The door opened. Light entered. Not much. A lantern. But after the cell's dimness, it seemed like sunrise made solid. Elias turned. Maribel stood in the doorway. For a moment, neither of them crossed the room. They only stared. She looked too bright to be real in that pale gown, hair coming loose from its pins, face white with shock. He saw her take in the cell, the pallet, the jug, the crate beneath the shaft, the wall where he had waited under her. Then she saw him. Really saw him. His unshaven face. The bruise fading along his cheek. His hollowed eyes. The way his shirt hung looser than it had. The dust on his hands. The terrible nearness of him. "Elias," she said. This time nothing stopped the sound. He tried to answer and found he could not. Maribel crossed the cell and reached for him. He met her halfway. Their embrace was not graceful. It was almost a collapse. She held him with both arms around his shoulders, and he bent into her as if his body had forgotten how to stand without longing. For a moment, all the stone, all the silence, all the lies narrowed to the simple fact of touch. She was real. He was real. Neither had left. Maribel pressed her face against his shoulder. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I thought. I know. I said. I heard." The words struck her. She pulled back enough to look at him, horror returning. "You heard." He tried to smile. It failed. "I heard everything." She closed her eyes as if the knowledge hurt physically. Elias lifted one hand, unsteady, and touched her cheek. "I heard you say my name too." That broke her. Tears came then, not delicately, not prettily. She held his wrist against her face and cried as if some guarded inner room had finally split open. Elias drew her back to him, eyes shut, and for a handful of seconds they were only two young people in a cellar, clinging to the proof that love had not been the lie. Alaric stood outside the doorway, looking away. Serapha had reached the corridor, one hand braced against the wall, sobbing silently. Garin kept his eyes toward the passage. "We have to move," he said. Maribel nodded against Elias, then forced herself to step back. "Can you walk?" "Yes." The answer came too quickly. He took one step and nearly fell. Maribel caught him. Garin moved to help, but Elias flinched before he could stop himself. Garin saw it and halted. Alaric stepped forward instead. "Lean on me," he said. Elias stared at him, confused by the stranger's fine coat and open hand. Maribel said, "He helped." That was enough. Elias accepted Alaric's arm. They left the cell. The corridor seemed impossibly long. Elias had imagined leaving so many times that the reality felt unstable. The air outside the cell was still underground air, cold and damp, but it moved differently. It had distance in it. It led somewhere. Halfway to the stair, Lord Edric appeared at the far end of the passage. He had not run. Somehow that was worse. He stood composed in black, one hand resting on the head of his cane though he had not carried it at dinner. Behind him came Brant and 2 more guards. Maribel stepped in front of Elias. Edric looked at her, then at Elias leaning on Alaric, then at Garin with the keys in his hand. "You have made a spectacle," he said. Maribel's voice shook, but she did not retreat. "No, I have opened one." Lord Halbrecht's voice came from behind them. He had followed more slowly, red-faced and breathing hard, with Ven hovering miserably at his side. "Edric," Halbrecht said, staring past Maribel into the open cell. "What in God's name have you done?" For the first time, Edric's control had nowhere clean to stand. There were too many witnesses. Too many eyes. Too much stone already speaking. Still, he tried. "A disciplinary matter concerning a tenant who attempted impropriety toward my daughter." "A disciplinary matter?" Maribel repeated. "You buried him under my bedroom." Edric's gaze snapped to her. "You will be silent." "No." The word echoed in the corridor. Elias, pale and shaking, lifted his head. "She said no," he rasped. Edric looked at him then. For a second, all the rage he had kept disciplined showed through. "You," he said. Just that. A whole world of contempt in one word. Elias should have been afraid. Part of him was. His body remembered the door, the darkness, the hunger, the days of shouting into a wall. But Maribel's hand was in his now. Her fingers were locked around his with a force almost painful. He looked at Edric and said, "I didn't leave." Maribel's grip tightened. Edric's mouth thinned. "No. You merely forgot your place." Elias swayed. Maribel steadied him. "My place," Elias said, voice rough, "was never yours to decide." Brant stepped forward, but Lord Halbrecht barked, "Stand down." The guard hesitated. Power shifted strangely in that moment. Not away from Edric entirely. Men like him did not become powerless because one door opened. But his power had become visible, and visible cruelty required explanations. Explanations were weaker than locks. Halbrecht turned to Garin. "Get the boy upstairs. Send for a physician." Edric said, "This is my house." Halbrecht faced him fully. "And now everyone in it knows what lies beneath." The words struck like a bell. Edric did not move. Maribel turned from him. That, more than accusation, changed his face. She turned away with Elias beside her, and for the first time in her life, she did not look back to see whether her father permitted it. They climbed. Slowly. Painfully. Elias could not manage the stairs alone. Alaric supported one side, Maribel the other. Garin walked ahead, clearing servants who had gathered despite orders. Serapha followed, one hand at her throat, as if afraid her own heart might escape. By the time they reached the main floor, whispers had already begun. A footman saw Elias. A maid gasped. Cook crossed herself. Ven disappeared. Elias Seldo arrived before the physician. No one ever clearly learned who sent for her. Later, Tomas claimed he had been waiting near the east gate when a stable boy ran out and shouted that the hall had cracked open. Mary said she remembered only the road, not the walking of it. Somehow she was there, shawl crooked, hair coming loose, face grey with fear and fierce with life. Elias was in a small parlour near the east side of the house when she entered. They had placed him on a sofa too fine for him, as if furniture still mattered. Maribel knelt beside him, refusing to move. Alaric stood by the window. Serapha hovered near the door. Garin waited in the hall, stripped of authority and yet still guarding something. Mary stopped just inside. Elias turned his head. "Mother." The word was barely more than breath. Mary crossed the room and took his face in both hands. She did not cry at first. She studied him with terrible care, as if counting what had been taken and what remained. Then she kissed his forehead. "My boy," she said. Elias closed his eyes. "I'm sorry." "No," Mary said at once. "No. Not from you." Maribel backed away slightly, giving them space, but Mary caught her wrist. The two women looked at each other. Maribel expected accusation. She deserved some portion of it, at least. Her love had brought danger to Elias. Her house had swallowed him. Her blood had ordered the door locked. Mary's grip tightened. "You found him," she said. Maribel's face crumpled. "Too late." Mary looked at Elias, then back at her. "We don't know that yet." But the physician's face, when he came, did not support her. Dr. Havel was old, stooped, and too experienced to waste hope with grand words. He examined Elias in the parlor while Maribel stood outside the door with Mary and Tomas, who had arrived breathless and muddy. Tomas had embraced Elias once before being forced out for the examination. Now he stood with both hands in his hair, staring at nothing. Inside, the physician asked questions. "How long without proper food? How much water? Any fever? Pain in the chest? Dizziness? How often had he slept?" Elias answered when he could. When Dr. Havel emerged, his expression was grave. "He needs rest, warmth, broth, and time," he said. Mary heard what was missing. "And?" The physician looked at her. "And we pray the body has not been asked for more than it can return." Maribel gripped the back of a chair. Tomas turned toward the wall and cursed softly. Mary nodded once, as if receiving weather. "Then give him broth," she said. "And warmth. And time. We will see what prayer can do after." Elias was moved not to Maribel's room, though she asked, nor to a guest chamber, though Halbrecht insisted, but to a small servant's sick room with a narrow bed and a fireplace that worked. Mary chose it. "Too many grand rooms in this house," she said. "They seem unhealthy." No one argued. For 2 days, Elias lived between waking and sleep. Maribel remained near whenever Mary allowed it. At first Mary allowed little. Not from cruelty. From focus. She fed him spoonfuls of broth, cooled his forehead, changed linens, measured his sips of water. Tomas came and went carrying messages, coal, bread, gossip, anything that gave his guilt hands. Alaric sent for medicines from the Halbrecht carriage and then had the decency to stay mostly out of the room. Lord Edric did not come. Not once. His absence filled the house like smoke. By the second evening, Elias woke properly. Maribel was seated beside the bed, head bowed, one hand resting near his but not touching it. Firelight softened the room. Rain tapped lightly at the small window. Somewhere far down the hall, Mary was speaking with Dr. Havel. Elias moved his fingers. Maribel looked up at once. "You're awake." "So are you." It was a poor joke. It was enough to make her almost smile. She leaned closer. "How do you feel?" "Like I argued with a house and lost." Her lips trembled. He regretted the joke then, but she took his hand carefully, as though afraid pressure might hurt him. "I thought you left," she said. "I know. I hated you. I know. I loved you at the same time." His eyes moved over her face. I know that too. She shut her eyes. Elias. No, his voice was weak but steady. Don't spend all of this apologizing. All of what? He did not answer quickly. That frightened her. All of what? She asked again. He looked toward the fire. I heard the physician. Maribel's grip tightened. He said you needed time. He said we should pray. That is not the same as dying. No. Then don't speak as if it is. Elias turned back to her. There was such gentleness in his face that she hated it. She wanted anger. Anger would mean strength. She wanted him furious, demanding justice, planning fields beyond Lowmere, mocking lords, laughing at danger. Gentleness felt too much like farewell rehearsing itself. Maribel, he said, I am here now. She shook her head. That is not enough. No. You don't get to say that calmly. I'm too tired to say it any other way. She bowed her head over their joined hands. He waited until her breathing steadied. Then he said, I need you to know something. No. That almost made him smile. You don't know what it is. I know I don't want it. I did not spend those days only suffering. She looked up, angry and wounded. Do not make it pretty. I'm not. Good. I spent them with you. Her face changed. He looked past her, not at the sickroom wall but at something only memory could show. I saw you tear the note. I saw you gather it back. I heard you call me coward. I heard you say you didn't know how to forgive silence. I hated the wall. I hated your father. I hated being unable to answer. But I never felt you were gone from me. Not fully. Maribel's eyes filled. I was cruel. You were lied to. I should have known. You did know. Just not quickly enough to save us from pain. That is not mercy. No, he said. It is only true. The door opened softly. Mary stood there. Maribel released Elias's hand, but he held on weakly. Mary saw. Something moved across her face. Grief, perhaps. Or acceptance. Or the memory of a younger Mary holding another doomed man's hand and learning too late that love did not negotiate with endings. He needs sleep, she said. Maribel nodded, but Elias held her a little tighter. Stay, he whispered. Mary looked at him. Then at Maribel. Then she sighed. Until he sleeps. Maribel stayed. Elias did sleep, eventually, with her hand in his and Mary seated on the other side of the bed, watching them both by firelight. Outside the sickroom, Aster Hall rearranged itself around scandal. Lord Halbrecht departed by morning, but Alaric remained as witness, against his father's preference. Dr. Havel sent sealed letters to the district magistrate. Van vanished from Lowmere before dawn and was caught by Thomas and 2 mill workers near the South Road, trying to carry estate ledgers in a carpet bag. Garin surrendered his keys and waited for whatever judgment would come. Brant was dismissed and locked in the old tack room after striking a groom who called him jailer. Olwen confessed to everything he knew and several things no one had asked. Lord Edric remained in his study. He did not flee. That would have been an admission of panic, and he had lived too long arranging himself against such displays. He sat at his desk with the lower left drawer open, the master keyring gone, Isolde's letters before him. He had read them all by then. Not because they comforted him. Because they did not. In one, written during Maribel's infancy, Isolde had said, "Promise me she will not grow up in a house where love must ask permission to breathe." He remembered ignoring that line years ago. Now it seemed to have waited for him. When Maribel entered without knocking, he was holding the letter. She saw it and stopped. Her face changed at the sight of her mother's handwriting. Not softened. Sharpened differently. "Did she write about me?" Maribel asked. Edric folded the letter slowly. "Often." "Did you listen?" He looked at his daughter. She stood in the doorway wearing a plain dark dress, her hair unadorned, her face pale from sleeplessness. No child remained in her. Or rather, the child had been forced to stand beside the woman too soon, both of them looking at him with the same wounded eyes. "I thought I did," he said. "No," Maribel replied. "You listened for what agreed with you." He accepted that without visible reaction. "Elias is asking for you," she said. That moved him. Only slightly. "Why?" "I don't know." "Do you want me to come?" "No." "Then why tell me?" "Because he asked, and unlike you, I will not decide his wishes are foolish because they hurt me." Edric looked down at Isolde's letter. Then he rose. The sick room went quiet when he entered. Mary stood at once, not in respect but readiness. Tomas, near the hearth, moved closer to her. Alaric remained by the window. Dr. Havel closed his bag with deliberate calm. Maribel followed her father in and stood beside Elias's bed. Elias looked smaller against the pillows. That disturbed Edric more than the cell had. In the cell, the boy had been a problem. Here, in clean linen, with fever-bright eyes and his mother's hand near his shoulder, he became plainly young. Plainly loved. Such details were unnecessary and therefore difficult. Elias turned his head. "Lord Aster." This time there was no defiance in the missing title. There was simply no title. Edric approached the bed. "You asked for me." "Yes." Mary's hand tightened on the chair back. Elias breathed carefully before speaking. "I need to say this while I can." Maribel flinched. Edric said nothing. Elias looked at him with a steadiness his weakened body should not have afforded. "You did not protect her." The room held still. "You taught her to doubt love," Elias continued. "You taught her rooms could be traps. You taught her truth might be under the floor, calling until its voice broke. Maybe she lives. Maybe she marries. Maybe she leaves this town. Maybe she forgives you one day, though I hope she takes her time." Maribel covered her mouth. Elias's voice thinned, but he forced it onward. "But she will never again feel safe in a house you built." Edric's expression did not change. Yet something in him recoiled. Elias shut his eyes briefly, gathering strength. Then he opened them. "And that is what you won." No one spoke. Not Mary. Not Maribel. Not Tomas, who had tears standing openly in his eyes and looked furious about them. Edric looked at the boy a long time. Then he said, "You believe I meant to kill you?" Elias's mouth curved faintly. "No," he said. "I think you meant to let dying become convenient." The precision of it entered the room like cold. Edric had no answer that would not reveal him further. So he gave none. Elias turned his face toward Maribel. "That's all." Mary looked at Edric. "Leave," she said. Not asked. Said. And because the room had shifted beyond him, because witnesses stood there, because authority once made visible had begun to rot, Lord Edric Aster left. That night, Elias worsened. Not dramatically. There was no single moment when everyone understood. His strength simply receded like water from shore. He slept more, woke less clearly. When awake, he knew them, but sometimes the room confused him. He asked once if the goats had been fed. Mary told him yes. Tomas, weeping in the corridor afterward, ran all the way to the Seldo farm to feed them himself, though 3 neighbors had already done it. Near dawn, Elias woke again. Maribel was there. So was Mary. The fire had burned low. Rain had stopped. In the grey light before sunrise, the sick room looked almost gentle. Elias turned his head toward Maribel. "Orchard," he whispered. She leaned closer. "What? Tell me." She understood. Her voice shook, but she obeyed. "The apple trees are flowering," she said. "The chapel wall is covered in ivy. The grass is wet because it rained in the night. There's a crow on the roof being rude to everyone." His breathing eased. Mary bowed her head. Maribel continued, holding his hand with both of hers. "You're late, of course. I pretend to be angry. You say something foolish about stonework or shoes or Seldo measure. I laugh even though I try not to. We walk where the road can't see us." Elias's eyes remained on her face. "And," he whispered. "And we don't leave." His fingers moved weakly around hers. "No hall," he said. "No hall. No cell. No cell. Just the orchard," Maribel said. He looked almost peaceful then. Almost. But not quite. Because tragedy, even when softened by love, remained itself. "Maribel. I'm here." He drew a breath that did not fill enough of him. "I know." Those were the last words he spoke. Mary made a sound then, low and broken, and gathered her son into her arms as much as the narrow bed allowed. Maribel stayed frozen for one impossible second, still holding his hand, waiting for some final correction from the world. There was none. Elias Seldo died just after dawn, not beneath her room, not behind the wall, not unheard. But still too young. Still stolen. Still with spring pressing pale light against the window as if morning had the right to arrive. Maribel did not scream. She bent over his hand and kissed the rough knuckles that had tapped back to her through stone. Then she placed his hand gently against his chest and stood. Mary looked up, face ruined by grief. Maribel could barely see her through tears. "I am going to the orchard," she said. Mary closed her eyes. Then nodded. Maribel left Aster Hall before anyone could stop her. She walked alone through the waking house, down the front steps, past servants who moved aside in silence, past the courtyard where carriage tracks still cut the mud, past the gate where no guard dared speak. Her pearl muslin gown from the dinner had been folded away. She wore black now. Not for Lord Halbrecht. Not for propriety. For Elias. Lowmere watched her descend the hill. By the time she reached St. Ara's chapel, the sun had risen behind thin cloud. The orchard stood wet and pale, blossoms trembling in the morning air. Everything was exactly as it had been and entirely changed. Maribel walked to the oldest apple tree and placed her palm against its bark. For a moment, she imagined another hand covering hers. Warm. Calloused. Alive. Then wind moved through the branches, scattering petals over her hair and shoulders. She looked back toward Aster Hall. From the orchard, it seemed smaller than from the town. Still powerful. Still pale. But no longer untouchable. Behind its walls, Lord Edric Aster had won the thing he set out to win. Elias would not marry his daughter. The farm boy would not take her name into some poor, impossible life. The affair was ended. The threat removed. The order of the house preserved in every practical sense that had once mattered to him. But Maribel understood what Elias had meant. Her father had not saved Aster Hall. He had taught her where to place the fire.